A poor waitress makes one reckless choice during a blackout. She helps a wounded stranger, then sleeps with him. No names, no promises. She runs before sunrise thinking it's over, until the next night when 50 black cars choke her street and the man from the dark steps out. He's not just any man, he's the city's quiet monster, and he says she left something behind. Him. Now the doors lock, the room freezes, and her life flips from tips to threats in one breath. He offers protection, but there's a price. Someone wants her, and not for love. A hidden key in her old locket, a ledger no one should have, and a bounty that puts her voice on the line. Inside his world, desire hits like danger, and betrayal lives under the same roof. When the real mastermind moves in the shadows, one choice could save them, or start a war. She can run again, or stand beside the only man who'd burn the city before he lets it take her. So when 50 engines roar for her name, will she choose freedom that kills, or a forbidden love that might be the only way out? Lightning flashed across Port Aurelia's waterfront as Calla Hart dragged the damp cloth across the last sticky table. The neon sign of Lou's Diner flickered weakly against the storm-dark windows, its reflection wavering in pools of rainwater on the empty parking lot outside. Thunder rolled overhead just as the light stuttered, then died completely. Calla froze, cloth still in hand, while her eyes adjusted to the sudden darkness. The only illumination came from distant street lamps and occasional bursts of lightning that turned the diner into a series of black and white photographs. The back door's subtle click might have gone unnoticed if she hadn't been holding her breath. Her heart jumped as a tall figure slipped inside, moving with deliberate grace despite what looked like a stiff shoulder. Even in the low light, his suit appeared expensive, the kind of tailoring that never showed up in this part of town. "We're closed," she called out, but her voice lacked conviction as he settled into the corner booth, his face calm despite the dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. Something about his quiet control made her move toward the front door instead of running. She turned the lock with trembling fingers, then retrieved the first aid kit from behind the counter. Years of patching up her mother's accidents had taught her enough. "Let me help," she said softly, sliding into the booth across from him. Lightning illuminated his face, strong jaw, eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully maintained walls. He didn't smile, but something in his expression softened. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question. His voice was low, cultured, with an accent she couldn't place. "Hold still." Calla's hands shook as she peeled back his jacket and shirt, revealing a clean knife wound. The first aid kit's contents spread across the table like surgical instruments while rain drummed against the windows. "This needs stitches." He watched her thread the needle, his breathing steady, despite what must have been considerable pain. "You have steady hands. Usually. But not tonight, not with him watching her every move, his presence filling the small booth until she could barely breathe. The storm's electricity seemed to crackle between them as she worked, her fingers brushing his warm skin with each careful stitch. "No names," he said suddenly, catching her wrist as she tied off the last suture. His grip was gentle but immovable. "Safer that way." Calla nodded, understanding perfectly. Names meant connections, and connections meant vulnerability. But his touch sent heat spiraling through her body, making her reckless. "No promises either." His thumb traced circles on her pulse point, and the air grew thick with possibility. Another crack of lightning, and she saw the hunger in his eyes, a mirror of her own. Without a word, he stood, drawing her with him toward the back door. His car idled in the shadows behind the diner, sleek and expensive like everything else about him. The rain had eased to a steady patter, but Calla was already soaked by the time he opened the door. She hesitated for just a moment, years of caution warring with an attraction so powerful it frightened her. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her lower lip. "Your choice," he murmured. But they both knew she'd made it the moment she locked the diner's door. The car's leather interior was warm, intimate. His kisses were hungry but controlled, like everything else about him. Calla lost herself in the storm-dark passion, in hands that knew exactly how to touch her, in the feeling of being completely desired by someone as dangerous as he was beautiful. Her mother's locket bounced against her collarbone as they moved together, its familiar weight a reminder of everything she stood to lose. But for these stolen moments, she didn't care. The storm raged around them while they created their own thunder, and Calla felt more alive than she had in years. Dawn was just beginning to lighten the clouds when reality crashed back. She tucked the locket beneath her shirt with trembling fingers, its micro key a cold reminder of secrets better kept. Without looking back, she slipped from the warm car into the cool morning air and ran. Her feet carried her through empty streets, past shuttered storefronts and early morning delivery trucks. Her clothes were still damp, her hair wild from his hands. Every shadow made her jump, certain he'd followed, terrified he hadn't. The walk up to her tiny studio apartment had never seemed so long. Cala's legs shook as she climbed the stairs, fumbling with her keys before practically falling through the door. She collapsed into her favorite thrifted armchair, the worn fabric familiar and safe against her skin. "Never again," she whispered to the empty room, but her fingers wouldn't stop touching her lips where she could still feel his kisses. The locket seemed to burn against her skin, heavy with secrets old and new. Outside, the storm that had changed everything finally eased into a gentle mist, but the thunder in her heart wouldn't quiet. Her studio looked exactly as she'd left it. Mismatched furniture, carefully arranged, second-hand books, stacked neatly, everything in its place. But Cala felt irrevocably altered, marked by hands that had mapped her body with devastating precision, haunted by eyes that had seen too much. She pressed her forehead against the cool window glass, watching the mist soften Port Aurelia's rough edges. The waterfront was barely visible, the diner where everything changed, nothing but a distant glow. Her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed and disheveled, still wearing the uniform that smelled of rain and expensive cologne. The locket's chain tangled in her fingers as she clutched it, the familiar metal warming to her touch. Inside, hidden from view, the micro key lay silent with its burden of secrets. Cala closed her eyes, but all she could see was his face in the lightning flashes. All she could feel was the ghost of his touch on her skin. The evening sun slanted through the diner's windows, painting golden streaks across freshly wiped tables. Cala straightened her apron for the 10th time, mechanically checking salt shakers and napkin dispensers. The routine motions helped quiet the voice in her head that kept replaying last night's storm. "It was nothing," she muttered, arranging sugar packets with precise fingers. "A moment of madness, that's all." The empty diner absorbed her words without judgment. The dinner rush wouldn't start for another hour, giving her time to fortify her carefully constructed walls of invisibility. She'd perfected the art of fading into the background over years of necessity. Keep your head down, smile, but not too brightly, be forgettable. The rules that had kept her safe suddenly felt as fragile as tissue paper. The first rumble was so distant she almost missed it. But something in that engine sound, expensive, powerful, controlled, made her fingers still on the counter. The rumble grew, multiplied, became a wave of mechanical thunder that made the windows vibrate in their frames. Cala's heart stumbled as black cars appeared at both ends of the street, sleek and predatory. They moved with military precision, boxing in the entire block. She counted them with growing horror, 20, 30, 50 vehicles, their tinted windows reflecting the dying sunlight. The few early dinner customers looked up from their meals, conversations dying mid-sentence. Even the cooks peered out from the kitchen, spatulas forgotten in their hands. The air grew thick with tension as the first car stopped directly in front of the diner's entrance. When he stepped out, Cala's fingers crushed the napkin she'd been folding. He wore another immaculate suit, no sign of last night's injury visible in his fluid movements. Men in dark suits emerged from the other cars, taking positions along the sidewalk and at every corner. They carried themselves with the same deadly grace as their leader, but their hands stayed carefully away from their weapons. The bell above the door chimed softly as he entered. The sound seemed absurdly normal in the heavy silence. His presence filled the space, making the diner feel smaller, more intimate, dangerous. "Good evening, he said, his voice carrying to every corner. "I'm Valerio DeAngelis." He smiled, the expression somehow both courteous and predatory. "I'm looking for Cala." Ice slid down her spine at the sound of her name on his lips. How had he found her? She'd been so careful, always so careful. "You left something behind last night," he continued, those dark eyes finding her with unerring accuracy. "Me." A coffee cup shattered somewhere in the kitchen. Nobody moved to clean it up. The other customers sat frozen, forks suspended halfway to mouths, coffee growing cold in forgotten cups. Valerio's men had positioned themselves strategically throughout the diner, by the kitchen, near the restrooms, flanking the main entrance. Their weapons remained holstered, but their presence spoke volumes about power and control. "I'd like a private word," Valerio said, his tone perfectly polite. The velvet courtesy in his voice made goosebumps rise on Cala's arms. This wasn't a request, despite its phrasing. She swallowed hard, mind racing through options that grew more limited by the second. "I'm working," she managed, proud that her voice didn't shake. Your shift ended 10 minutes ago, he replied smoothly. Of course he knew her schedule. Calla backed away from the counter, her body moving on instinct toward the rear exit. I don't want to talk. His smile didn't waver. Are you sure? She turned and ran, pushing through the kitchen's swinging doors. The cooks pressed themselves against the walls, giving her a clear path to the back door. She burst out into the alley, hope rising, only to die at the sight of more black cars idling in the shadows, their headlights dim but watchful. The door opened behind her. Calla, his voice was softer now, meant for her ears alone. You're not in danger. She turned slowly, trapped between Valerio and the waiting cars. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the kitchen's fluorescent lights. The contrast threw his face into shadow, but she could feel the weight of his gaze. Your customers, she said, grasping for any delay. They're frightened. They're fine. He stepped closer, moving with that liquid grace that had first caught her attention. I've settled every check. My men will ensure everyone leaves safely. As if to prove his point, the kitchen door opened again. One of his men emerged, speaking quietly into an earpiece. All bills paid in cash, sir. Extra tip for the staff. Everyone inside is calm. Valerio nodded without taking his eyes off Calla. See? No one is in danger. No one is threatened. He moved to the nearest car and opened the passenger door with an elegant gesture. Just a conversation, Calla. That's all I'm asking for. She looked at the open door, then back at the diner. Through the kitchen windows, she could see his men efficiently clearing tables, helping elderly customers with their coats, maintaining that careful politeness that somehow made everything more terrifying. The reality of her situation settled like lead in her stomach. He'd found her in less than 24 hours. He knew her name, her workplace, her schedule. He had enough men to lock down an entire city block without raising a single weapon. And he'd done it all with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. All her exits had vanished as quietly as morning mist, replaced by black cars and watchful men. She could feel the weight of her mother's locket against her skin, heavy with its hidden secrets. The micro-key seemed to burn, a reminder of everything she couldn't afford to lose. Valerio waited by the open door, patient and immovable as a statue. His presence filled the alley, making the space between them crackle with unfinished business. Last night's passion hung in the air like smoke, dangerous and intoxicating. With trembling legs, Calla crossed the distance to the car. She paused at the door, close enough to smell his cologne, to feel the heat radiating from his body. Then, because there was nowhere else to go, she slid into the leather seat, her uniform skirt whispering against the expensive upholstery. The city light sliced through the tinted windows, painting silver stripes across the leather interior. Calla's hands twisted in her lap as the car glided through traffic, her heart hammering against her ribs. Valerio sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. Yet he maintained a careful distance. He reached into his briefcase, extracting a manila folder that he placed on her lap with deliberate precision. Your landlord made an interesting transaction this morning. The folder felt heavy, weighted with more than just paper. Calla's fingers trembled as she opened it, revealing documents with official letterheads and strings of numbers that made her stomach drop. Your debt has been sold, Valerio continued, his voice carrying the same quiet control as when he'd first walked into the diner. The new owners are associates of the Mancino cartel. Calla's breath caught. Everyone knew that name, whispered in corners of Port Aurelia like a curse. The Mancinos didn't collect debts. They collected people. I don't understand, she whispered, though the numbers swimming before her eyes told a clear story. Her mother's medical bills, the loans that had seemed manageable until they weren't, the mounting interest that kept her running in place. The transfer was completed at 9 this morning. Valerio turned a page in the folder, revealing more documents with signatures and stamps that made everything official. They planned to begin collection in 48 hours. Her fingers found her mother's locket, clutching it like a lifeline. Collection? Instead of answering, Valerio showed her a photograph. The timestamp read 12:03 p.m., just hours ago. A man in a leather jacket leaned against a lamppost outside her apartment building, his face bearing scars that spoke of violence. Marco Russo, Valerio said softly. The Mancino's preferred debt collector. He has a particular method of ensuring payment. The car turned onto the waterfront boulevard, where massive condos reflected the moonlight off their glass facades. Calla stared at the photo, her mind spinning through implications. She'd heard whispers about people who couldn't pay, about disappeared daughters and sons who resurfaced in underground clubs or never resurfaced at all. "Why are you showing me this?" Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Because you have a choice." Valerio turned to face her fully, his profile sharp against the passing lights. "I can erase the debt, all of it. You'll come with me now, stay under my protection, and the Mancinos will have no claim on you." The alternative hung unspoken between them, but Cala's imagination filled in the blanks. Marco Russo's scarred face seemed to leer from the photograph. "And if I refuse your protection?" "Then you walk away." His words were simple, matter of fact. "But the Mancinos will come to collect what they believe they're owed, and they won't be as gentle as I am." Gentle. The word seemed absurd coming from a man who had mobilized an army to find her. Yet compared to the Mancinos, the car slowed, turning into an underground garage beneath one of the city's most exclusive buildings. Cala's fingers clenched around the folder, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to run. But where? Her apartment wasn't safe. Her job couldn't cover the debt. Her few friends couldn't stand against the Mancinos. The vehicle came to a stop in a private section of the garage, where other luxury cars gleamed under soft lighting. Valerio's driver opened the door, standing at attention as Cala stepped out on shaky legs. The concrete floor was cool through her thin work shoes. The air smelled of expensive cars and subtle security. Cameras watched from discreet corners, and she spotted at least 3 armed guards positioned near the elevators. Valerio emerged from the car with fluid grace, his movements precise and controlled. Without warning, he shrugged off his suit jacket, a gesture that made Cala flinch backward. But instead of touching her, he simply held the jacket out, offering warmth against the garage's chill. When she didn't move, he draped it carefully around her shoulders, never letting his fingers brush her skin. The jacket was warm from his body, heavy with the scent of his cologne, and far too big for her frame. She felt like a child playing dress-up, yet somehow the weight of it was comforting. They walked to the private elevator in silence, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Cala clutched the folder to her chest, her mind still spinning through options that all led to dead ends. The Mancinos? Or Valerio? A cage or a coffin? At least Valerio's cage looked like safety. The elevator doors were mirrored, throwing their reflections back at them in stark relief. Cala looked small and wild-eyed, drowning in his jacket, her waitress uniform rumpled from the long day. Beside her, Valerio towered in his perfectly tailored shirt and slacks, his expression unreadable as marble. As the doors slid closed, Cala studied their reflections, the unlikely pair they made, forced together by debt and danger. The elevator hummed to life, beginning its ascent to whatever waited above. In the mirrored surface, she watched Valerio's reflection, searching for any hint of the man from last night, any trace of the passion they'd shared in the storm. But his face remained impassive, giving nothing away as the elevator carried them upward. 2 strangers, sealed into forced proximity, their fates now intertwined by choices that felt less like choices with each passing floor. The jacket's weight pressed against her shoulders like a reminder of what she'd agreed to. Protection, safety, words that could mean anything in a world where debt collectors left scars and powerful men commanded armies to find one waitress. The elevator continued its smooth ascent, carrying them toward whatever came next. In the mirrored doors, their reflection stood frozen, her small, fierce form and his towering presence locked together in this moment of no return. The penthouse sprawled across the top floor like a glass castle in the sky, floor-to-ceiling windows wrapping around 3 sides to showcase Port Aurelia's glittering skyline. Cala padded across heated marble floors in borrowed clothes that still crackled with newness, a soft gray t-shirt and black leggings that had appeared outside her temporary room, tags attached, sizes perfect. The living space felt both opulent and stark. Modern furniture in grays and whites created islands of comfort in the vast open plan. A massive television mounted on one of the few solid walls murmured news about a warehouse fire in the industrial district. The anchor's voice was carefully neutral as she described the blaze that had claimed a Mancino-owned storage facility. Dr. Chen worked with quiet efficiency at the dining table, her medical bag open beside her as she extracted a metal splinter from Valerio's shoulder. The wound, the one Cala had stitched in the diner, had reopened during whatever violence had preceded their meeting. "The entry point is clean now," Dr. Chen murmured, dropping the fragment into a metal dish with a tiny clink. "But you need to limit movement for at least 24 hours. Valerio gave a slight nod, his face betraying no discomfort as the doctor applied fresh bandages. His shirt lay folded beside him, revealing a torso mapped with old scars, some surgical neat, others jagged with history. Calla hovered uncertainly near the kitchen island, feeling like an intruder in this pristine space. When she shifted her weight, her mother's locket swung free from beneath the t-shirt, catching the light. Valerio's eyes locked onto the movement. "May I see that?" The request was gentle, but Calla's hand flew to the locket protectively. It was all she had left of her mother. Maria Hart, who'd vanished 5 years ago, leaving only debts and whispers behind. "Please," Valerio added. "It might be important." Something in his tone made her hesitate. Slowly, Calla unclasped the chain and carried it to him. The locket was old silver, unremarkable except for the delicate etching around its edges. She'd never managed to open it. The mechanism seemed fused shut. Valerio examined it with careful fingers, finding a hidden catch she'd never noticed. The locket sprang open, revealing not photos, but a wafer-thin metal plate with microscopic patterns etched across its surface. His breath caught. "This is a key plate." "A what?" "It's used to unlock certain secure vaults. Old technology, but nearly impossible to crack without the matching plate." He looked up at her, eyes intent. "This particular pattern, it matches a De Angelis ledger vault, one that disappeared the same time your mother did." Calla's knees went weak. She gripped the edge of the table. "My mother was just a bookkeeper." "She was my father's head accountant," Valerio corrected quietly. "And she vanished with proof of certain transactions, proof that could destroy several families, including the Mancinos." The room seemed to tilt. Her mother's warnings about staying invisible, the careful habits she'd taught Calla about covering tracks and reading rooms, none of it had been random. She'd been preparing Calla for this moment. "The debt transfer wasn't a coincidence," Calla whispered. "No, they're using you to flush out the ledger." Valerio touched his earpiece. "Double the perimeter. Full scan of surrounding buildings. No one in or out without direct clearance." Men materialized from corners Calla hadn't even noticed were guarded, moving with practiced efficiency. Valerio pulled his shirt back on, movements careful around the fresh bandaging. "Get her a secure phone," he ordered one of the men, "and have the kitchen send up dinner, something light." He glanced at Calla. "When did you last eat?" She couldn't remember. The diner felt like years ago instead of hours. A sleek phone appeared in her hands, already programmed with emergency contacts. The kitchen promised food in 20 minutes. Everything moved with the smooth precision of a well-oiled machine, making Calla feel even more out of place. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure out where your mother hid that ledger." Valerio's voice was grim. "Before the Mancinos decide to use more persuasive methods to make you remember." "But I don't know anything." "They won't believe that." He moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I'll keep you safe, Calla, but you have to trust me." Trust. Such a simple word for such an impossible thing. Yet what choice did she have? The television droned on about the warehouse fire, showing aerial footage of smoke still rising from the ruins. Calla wondered if it was related. Another move in this chess game she hadn't known she was playing. A flicker of red light caught her eye, a tiny dot dancing across the window glass. Before her brain could process what it meant, Valerio's body slammed into hers. They hit the floor behind the kitchen island as a muted pop shattered the perfect silence. The window starred but held, designed to withstand exactly this kind of attack. The red dot vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the crackled glass as evidence it had ever existed. Calla lay pinned beneath Valerio's protective weight, her heart thundering against his chest. His breathing remained steady, controlled, even as his muscles coiled with lethal tension. One hand cradled the back of her head, where it might have struck the marble. The other already held a weapon she hadn't seen him draw. The locket lay between them, winking in the overhead lights. A tiny silver compass pointing toward secrets worth killing for. In the distance, sirens began to wail. The penthouse hummed with controlled chaos. Security alarms fell silent as reinforced shields glided down over the windows, sealing them in darkness until soft ambient lighting flickered to life. Calla stayed pressed against the cool kitchen floor, her pulse hammering in her throat as she watched Valerio move with lethal grace. He shed his protective stance over her in stages, scanning the room before rising. 2 men materialized at his side, one tall and broad, the other compact and wiry. Neither spoke as Valerio gestured toward the balcony. They moved as a unit, weapons drawn. The balcony door whispered open. Calla flinched at the sharp cracks of gunfire, precise and controlled. She pressed her sweating palms against the marble, fighting the urge to crawl somewhere smaller, darker. The shooting stopped as quickly as it began. When Valerio returned, his face was carved from stone, but his eyes, when they found her, held something else, a protective fury that made her breath catch. He wasn't angry about the damaged window or the breach in security. He was angry because someone had dared to threaten her. "Clear for now," the taller man reported. "Rocco's team is sweeping the building they used." Valerio nodded. "Double patrols. I want eyes on every approach." Hours crawled by in tense silence. Calla couldn't sleep, couldn't settle. She paced the living room while Valerio worked, his voice low as he issued orders through his phone. Dawn crept in around the edges of the shields, painting thin gold lines across the floor. The smell of coffee finally broke the tension. Valerio appeared with 2 steaming cups, setting one before her. "We need to talk about security protocols." Calla wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic. "You mean rules for my new cage?" "Protection," he corrected. "You don't leave this floor without me or Rocco. No unauthorized calls. The locket stays with you at all times." His tone softened. "I know it feels like a cage, but it's necessary." Anger flared, hot and sudden. She yanked off his jacket, still draped around her shoulders, and threw it at his chest. "Necessary for whom? You're the one who dragged me into this." He caught the jacket one-handed, set it aside, and moved toward the kitchen with measured steps. "Let me make you breakfast." The unexpected offer stopped her short. "What? You haven't eaten. Neither have I." He opened the refrigerator, movements efficient as he gathered ingredients. "Eggs? Toast?" Calla watched in bewilderment as Valerio D'Angelis, who commanded small armies with a whisper, cracked eggs into a bowl. His hands remained steady as he whisked, his voice low, and even as he continued speaking. "Control isn't about cruelty, Calla. It's about survival. Everything I do has a purpose." He poured the eggs into a heated pan. "Including keeping you safe." The simple domesticity of the moment struck her harder than any show of force. He wasn't trying to intimidate her into compliance. He was showing her that even in chaos, control could mean care. "Why?" she asked. "Why go to all this trouble?" He looked up, and the heat in his gaze had nothing to do with protection. "You know why?" The air between them thickened, charged with the memory of that stormy night. Calla moved closer, drawn by some force she couldn't name. Valerio set down the spatula, turning to face her fully. "Tell me to stop," he murmured as she stepped into his space. Instead, she rose on her toes and pressed her mouth to his. The kiss started gentle, a test, a question. His hand settled at her waist, warm through the thin cotton of her borrowed shirt. She wound her arms around his neck, pressing closer. Control shattered. Valerio backed her against the counter, lifting her onto its surface. Calla gasped as his teeth grazed her throat, her legs wrapping around his hips. They tried to slow down, to breathe, but the pull was too strong. The eggs burned. Forgotten. Hours later, tangled in his sheets, Calla traced the scars on Valerio's chest while he slept beside her. His face was younger in rest, the hard lines softened. One arm remained curved around her waist, protective even in sleep. She'd learned things about him in the dark, how gentle those lethal hands could be, how he whispered her name like a prayer, how completely he gave himself over to pleasure once he allowed himself to let go. She'd learned things about herself too, how much she craved his touch, how perfectly they fit together, how safe she felt in the arms of the most dangerous man she'd ever met. The night deepened around them. For the first time in years, Valerio slept without waking, his breathing deep and even. Calla watched the rise and fall of his chest, wondering how a single day had changed everything she thought she knew about safety and danger, about control and surrender. The locket rested on the nightstand, gleaming dully in the darkness. Its secrets could wait until morning. For now, in this quiet space between chaos and dawn, Calla let herself believe that some cages could become sanctuaries, and some dangerous men could become safe harbors in the storm. Gray light filtered through the blackout shield's thin gaps, painting stripes across the rumpled sheets. Calla propped herself on one elbow, studying Valerio's sleeping face, without the razor-sharp focus that usually carved his features. He looked younger, almost peaceful. The hard lines around his mouth had softened, dark lashes resting against cheeks that had flushed with warmth during the night. Her fingers hovered over the fresh bandage on his shoulder, remembering how differently they'd met just days ago. A wounded stranger in a storm-dark diner, now transformed into something far more complicated. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. The clandestine doctor, Marcus, she'd learned, waited in the doorway with his medical bag. Valerio stirred at the sound, instantly alert. His hand reached for Calla before his eyes fully opened, checking her position with unconscious protectiveness. "Just a quick check," Marcus said quietly, approaching with practiced ease. "The stitches need inspection after last night's activity." Valerio sat up, sheets pooling at his waist. As Marcus worked, Calla's attention caught on the extensive scarring that laddered Valerio's right side. Pale tissue stretched from his ribs to his hip, old but dramatic. "What happened there?" she asked, desperate to distract him from Marcus's prodding fingers. Valerio's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Warehouse fire. 12 years ago." "The night everything changed," Marcus added, earning a sharp look from Valerio. "My brother died that night," Valerio continued after a long pause. "The warehouse was one of our main distribution centers. Someone had been skimming profits, laundering money through shell companies. Marco discovered the theft, but before he could expose it..." He trailed off, eyes distant. Calla touched his hand. "The fire wasn't an accident." "No." His fingers interlaced with hers. "I was 19. Marco was 23. He'd just made captain, was starting to see the rot in our father's empire. The fire trapped us both. I got these trying to reach him through a collapsed section. By the time I broke through..." He swallowed hard. "The medical examiner said the smoke got him first. Small mercy." Marcus finished his examination in respectful silence. "Stitches are holding well. Keep them dry another day." After the doctor left, Calla traced the scars with gentle fingers. "You never found who did it." "The investigation died with my father 6 months later. Heart attack, they said. But I always wondered..." Valerio caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "The empire nearly devoured itself that year. Marco was gone. Father was gone. And suddenly I had to hold everything together while hunting shadows." The morning stretched into afternoon, sunlight shifting across the floor. They dozed, talked, made love again with aching tenderness. Reality intruded only when Rocco arrived, tablet in hand and worry creasing his usually stoic features. "Boss," he said from the doorway, "we have a situation." They dressed quickly. In the living room, Rocco pulled up surveillance photos. "Mancino's doubled the bounty on her. New parameters specified. They want her alive and loud." Calla's stomach clenched. Valerio's hand found the small of her back, steadying. "They're getting desperate," he said. "Which means they're getting sloppy. How many teams have they deployed?" 3 that we've identified, all heavy hitters." Rocco scrolled through more photos. "They're watching known DeAngelis properties, including the old banking district." Valerio nodded. "Start mapping routes to the deep house. I want options by dinner." As the men pored over security feeds, Calla retreated to the guest room with her new secure phone. She needed distraction from the growing knot of fear in her chest. The phone's interface was simple, but heavily encrypted. As she tested features, her mother's locket caught the light. Something about the pattern inside nagged at her. She'd always assumed the micro-etched design was decorative. But now... She pulled up the phone's clock, studying the digital display. Her mother had loved palindromes, especially in timestamps. She'd used them as validation codes in the books she kept. 11:11, 22:22, 15:51. Calla's heart raced as she examined the locket's pattern more closely. There, hidden in the sweeping lines, numbers, times, all palindromes, all pointing to something more. "Valerio," she called softly. He appeared in the doorway instantly, tension easing when he saw her safe. "Look at this." He sat beside her on the bed, taking the locket carefully. Night had begun to fold around the penthouse, like a dark fist, but the lamp's glow was enough to see by. Calla guided his finger along the pattern. "My mother coded everything in palindrome timestamps. See? These aren't just decorative swirls, they're numbers, coordinates maybe, or vault combinations." Valerio traced the pattern on her open palm, memorizing it through touch. "This could be what we need. If these numbers lead to the ledger..." "We end this," Calla finished. "We end this," he agreed, voice fierce with promise. Outside, the city lights bloomed against gathering darkness. Inside, they bent their heads together over the locket's secrets, while somewhere in the shadows, their enemies drew ever closer to their door. Dawn hadn't touched the city when they descended into the abandoned theater's sublevels. The air hung thick with decades of dust and neglect, their footsteps echoing off bare concrete. Rocco had cleared the perimeter, but Valerio kept one hand at the small of Cala's back, the other on his weapon. The vault door looked ordinary, just another utility entrance in a maze of maintenance corridors. But when Valerio aligned Cala's locket with the disguised reader, ancient mechanisms whirred to life. "Mom really knew what she was doing," Cala whispered as the door swung inward. Their flashlights carved twin beams through darkness. The vault itself was small, barely larger than a storage closet. Metal shelving lined 3 walls, mostly empty except for a false conduit pipe that didn't quite match its neighbors. Valerio reached behind it and extracted a slim steel case. "Your mother was thorough." Inside, the ledger's pages crackled with age but remained crisp and readable. Cala recognized her mother's precise handwriting immediately. Columns of numbers, shipping manifests, property deeds. But between the legitimate business records lay something darker. Payoff schedules, protection routes, political bribes that had kept peace between DeAngelis and Mancino for nearly 2 decades. They spread the pages across a fold-out table Rocco had brought. Cala's fingers traced familiar patterns in her mother's bookkeeping. "Look at these balance sheets. The way she offset these columns." "What do you see?" Valerio leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Mom always built backdoors into her books, ways to prove fraud without implicating herself." Cala pulled several pages together. "See these adjustments? They show money moving between shell companies, but the pattern..." She pointed to a series of entries. "Someone was siphoning funds to build a private army. Not Mancino's people. These accounts all trace back to DeAngelis Holdings." Valerio's expression hardened. "A coup attempt from inside our own house." "There's more." Cala flipped to the final pages. These entries stopped just before the warehouse fire, but look at the last line. It references a payment to Ghost Key Securities the day before. Mom flagged it with her warning symbol. "I remember that company. They specialized in accident staging, fires, car crashes, anything that needed to look random." Valerio's knuckles whitened against the table edge. "Marco wasn't killed by Mancino. Someone in our organization arranged it." A soft scrape echoed from the corridor, metal on concrete where no sound should be. Valerio moved like lightning, shoving Cala behind him as he drew his weapon. Rocco materialized in the doorway, gun already aimed down the hall. "Clear," he reported after a tense moment, "but we should move." They packed the ledger quickly, erasing all signs of their presence. The ride back to the penthouse was silent, heavy with revelation. Valerio's phone buzzed constantly, with updates from his network, coordinates, and schedules flowing as they prepared to move against their enemies. In the penthouse's war room, Gabe Ferry hunched over multiple screens, directing convoy movements with his usual nervous energy. "We've got 3 secure routes mapped for tonight's shipments. I'll have the final schedule ready in an hour." "Make it 30 minutes, Valerio ordered. "And Gabe, triple-check those routes yourself. No mistakes." "Of course, boss. Crystal clear." Gabe's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Cala watched him from across the room, something nagging at her instincts. The way he kept glancing at his phone, the slight tremor in his hands that wasn't quite anxiety. Hours later, Rocco burst into Valerio's office, expression thunderous. He dropped a cheap burner phone on the desk between them. "Found this in Gabe's desk. He's been feeding our routes to Mancino's people for weeks." Valerio lifted the phone carefully, scrolling through messages. His face went completely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "Get me everything, every contact, every compromised route, every cent they paid him." "Already done." Rocco spread surveillance photos across the desk. "He's met their handler 3 times this month. Last meeting was yesterday, right after you told him about moving the ledger." "Where is he now?" "Still in the comms room. Hasn't noticed the phone's missing yet." Cala studied the messages, her mother's training kicking in. "These aren't just convoy routes. Look at the timestamps, the way he formats the addresses. He's giving them personnel movements, too. Security rotations, safe house locations." "The leak wasn't just about profit," Valerio said softly. "It was about access. They wanted to know exactly where to hit us." Rocco's phone chimed. "Boss, Gabe just received a new message on his main line. Tonight's convoy schedule is being called off due to mechanical issues." "He's trying to buy them time to move against us." Valerio's voice was ice. "How many men do we have in position?" "Full tactical team standing by. We can lock down every exit in 3 minutes." "Do it quietly. I want him contained, not spooked." Valerio turned to Cala. "Stay here, please." She nodded, throat tight. He brushed his fingers across her cheek, a gentle contrast to the lethal focus in his eyes. Then he was gone, moving with Rocco toward the comms room where their treacherous fixer sat unknowing, still feeding secrets to their enemies through dying channels. The burner phone sat dark and damning on the desk, its screen reflecting the city lights like distant fires. Rain slashed against bulletproof glass as Valerio's SUV glided through Port Aurelia's warehouse district. Cala's fingers twisted in her lap, every shadow looking like an ambush. The convoy schedule Gabe had leaked showed them moving the ledger tonight, bait too tempting for their enemies to ignore. "Stay low," Valerio murmured, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near his weapon. "Whatever happens, you follow my lead." Rocco drove point in the lead vehicle, scanning cross streets through the downpour. Their radio crackled with position checks, a steady rhythm of clear zones and blind corners. The attack came at the narrowest part of their route. 2 white vans shot out from side alleys, boxing them between shipping containers. Metal screamed as the first van clipped their front bumper. "Down!" Valerio shouted, shoving Cala below the dashboard. The SUV lurched as he cranked the wheel hard, muscles straining. They hit the lead van at an angle, forcing a gap wide enough to squeeze through. Glass exploded inward as bullets starred the windows. Valerio's elbow smashed through the weakened pane, clearing a path. In one fluid motion, he reached across Cala, dragging her over the center console and into his lap. His body curved around her like armor as more shots peppered the vehicle. Rocco's voice cut through the chaos. "Northwest exit clear, moving to secondary." Valerio gunned the engine, tires spinning on wet pavement. Cala pressed against his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath his suit. The SUV fishtailed around a corner, then another, Valerio driving one-handed while keeping her secured against him. They screamed onto a private dock lined with shipping containers. A nondescript sedan waited in the shadows, engine already running. Rocco appeared beside them, providing cover as Valerio hustled Cala into the new vehicle. 40 seconds, Rocco reported, sliding behind the wheel. "Clean switch." They left the bullet-riddled SUV behind, melting into traffic before their pursuers could regroup. Cala's hands shook as she checked herself for injuries. Beside her, Valerio methodically reloaded his weapon, his movements precise despite the adrenaline. "Are you hurt?" he asked, voice tight with controlled rage. She shook her head. "They knew exactly where to hit us." "Yes." His jaw clenched. "They did." The penthouse garage was quiet when they arrived, but tension crackled through the air. They found Gabe in the command center, frantically working his phones. "Thank God you're back," he babbled, rising from his desk. "I just heard about the attack. Someone must have leaked." "Someone did." Valerio's voice could have frozen hell. He advanced on Gabe, each step measured. "Would you like to explain why Mancino's men knew our exact route?" Color drained from Gabe's face. I wouldn't." "The burner phone in your desk suggests otherwise." Valerio's hand shot out, grabbing Gabe's throat. "Every route, every schedule, every piece of intel you sold while pretending loyalty." "Please," Gabe wheezed. "They threatened my family." "Your family is in Milan, safe, protected, by me." Valerio's fingers tightened. "Try again." "Valerio!" Cala touched his arm. "Wait." His grip didn't loosen, but his eyes flicked to her. "The ledger shows another dead drop scheduled," she said carefully. "We can use him. Feed false information through his channel, lead them into a trap instead of just eliminating him." Valerio studied her face, weighing options. Finally, his hand dropped from Gabe's throat. "Explain." Cala opened the ledger to the relevant page. "These codes indicate regular information exchanges. If we control what Gabe tells them, we choose the battlefield. A reverse channel." Valerio's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Using their own spy against them. It's cleaner than leaving a body," she added softly. "And more useful." Gabe sagged against his desk, rubbing his throat. "I'll tell you everything, whatever you want to know." "Shut up!" Valerio snapped his fingers, and 2 guards materialized. "Watch him. He doesn't leave this floor, touch any electronics, or speak to anyone without my explicit permission." He turned back to Gabe. "Consider yourself fortunate she's more strategic than I am. Betray that mercy, and there won't be enough left of you to bury." Hours later, Cala sat at Valerio's dining table, the ledger open before her. She traced her mother's careful columns, decoding patterns that would help them set their trap. Valerio stood behind her chair, one hand resting possessively on her shoulder, while the other pointed out key entries. "If we move the meeting point here," he mused, "we control all approaches." Cala nodded, making notes. "Mom's code suggests they're careful about timing. We'll need to match their expectations exactly." "We will." His hand slid down her arm to cover hers where it lay on the ledger. The touch was both protective and promising, a reminder that they were in this together now, bound by danger and growing trust. She leaned back against him, letting his solid presence steady her. Outside, the city glittered with false peace, while they planned war in whispers, their joined hands resting on pages that had already cost so much blood. "We'll end this," Valerio murmured, echoing his earlier promise. "Together." Calla turned her palm up to lace their fingers together, feeling the calluses that marked him as both businessman and fighter. Their shared warmth sank into the leather-bound ledger beneath, a book of secrets that had brought them together and might tear their world apart. Late afternoon sun slanted through the penthouse windows as Calla held her mother's locket at precise angles under the desk lamp. Valerio leaned close, watching light dance across the micro-etched surface. "There," she breathed, tilting the metal. Numbers appeared in the reflection, then vanished like a mirage. "Mom always said the truth shows up when you look sideways at it." Valerio jotted down the coordinates. "These match a subsection of the theater vault. Your mother built redundancy into everything. She knew someone would come looking eventually." Calla's fingers trembled slightly as she secured the locket back around her neck. Whatever's hidden there, she thought it was worth dying to protect. They took a different route to the theater this time, switching cars twice. The vault looked exactly as they'd left it, save for the disturbed dust showing their previous tracks. Valerio input the new coordinates into the antiquated keypad while Calla kept watch. A soft click echoed in the confined space. A panel, previously invisible, slid open in the vault's rear wall. Inside lay a metal case containing several microtapes and a sealed envelope. "Official letterhead," Calla noted, examining the envelope. "Notary stamps from 12 years ago." Valerio's expression hardened as he read the affidavit. His hands began to shake, subtle tremors that grew until papers scattered across the floor. Calla grabbed the last page before it could fall, scanning the text rapidly. The truth was worse than any of their theories. According to sworn testimony, Valerio's father had orchestrated the warehouse incident himself. He'd authorized shipments that deliberately left his younger son exposed, counting on rival retaliation. One son's death would serve as justification for aggressive expansion while eliminating what the old man saw as a liability. Someone too soft to lead effectively. He wanted him dead. Valerio's voice cracked like ice. "My own father set up my brother's murder to prove a point about weakness." His fist slammed into a metal shelf, buckling the steel. Blood welled between his knuckles, but he didn't seem to notice, already drawing back for another strike. "Stop!" Calla caught his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth." "I can't." His chest heaved. "I trusted him. I mourned with him. I let him shape me into exactly what he wanted," she finished softly. "But you're not him, Valerio. You get to choose who you become now." "The man I want to be," he whispered. "The man you deserve. He can't exist while my father's poison runs through everything I touch." She pressed her palm to his cheek, feeling the muscle jump beneath his skin. "Then we burn out the poison, the right way this time." They gathered the evidence carefully, securing it in a waterproof case. The drive home was silent, Valerio's knuckles white on the steering wheel. Calla watched city lights streak past, knowing something had broken irreparably in that vault. The penthouse felt different when they arrived, colder somehow. Valerio stood at the windows, backlit by the setting sun, his reflection fractured across the glass. "You have to go." His voice was winter itself. "The safe house is ready." "Valerio!" "This ends now." He turned, eyes empty of everything that had grown between them. "You were a temporary diversion, nothing more." The words hit like slaps, each one precisely aimed to wound. Calla's heart cracked, but her spine stayed straight. "We both know that's a lie." "Do we?" His laugh was cruel. "You're naive enough to think a few nights meant anything? That I'd risk everything I've built for a waitress with a pretty face?" Every syllable was calculated to push her away, to make her hate him enough to leave. She saw the strategy behind his cruelty. If she was gone, she couldn't be used against him while he dismantled his father's empire from within. "The convoy leaves at dawn," he continued, each word another brick in the wall between them. "Rocco will ensure your safety until this is finished. Do not attempt contact." She wanted to fight, to shake him until the mask cracked, to demand he find another way. But love sometimes meant letting someone go so they could do what needed to be done. "I understand." Her voice stayed steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "You're choosing to protect me by pushing me away. Just remember, I'm choosing to let you." Something flickered in his eyes, a crack in the facade, but his expression remained carved from stone. He turned back to the window, dismissing her without another word. Dawn painted the city gold as Calla climbed into the waiting SUV. She didn't look back at the penthouse, didn't search for his silhouette in the windows. Her mother's locket rested against her heart, carrying new secrets now. "I'll survive this," she whispered to herself as the convoy pulled away. "So you can live long enough to come back the right way." The city blurred around them, its morning routine oblivious to the hearts breaking in its midst. Calla watched her familiar streets disappear, replaced by highways leading to somewhere safer but infinitely more alone. She touched the locket once more, finding strength in its familiar edges. Whatever came next, she would endure it. For both of them. Salt and weathered wood filled Calla's lungs as she paced the safe house's worn floorboards. Morning light filtered through grimy windows, casting long shadows across stacked crates and canvas-covered furniture. The dockside building creaked with each wave that lapped against the pilings below, a constant reminder of her proximity to the water. She refused to hide in the bedroom they'd prepared for her. Instead, she spread the ledger across a scarred table, fingers tracing her mother's careful columns. The familiar handwriting brought both comfort and clarity. She recognized the pattern now, the way certain dates appeared in palindrome sequences, pointing to scheduled drops. "Tonight," she whispered, tapping an entry. The old pier, midnight. Her mother had marked it with a tiny star, barely visible unless you knew to look. Calla grabbed her secure phone, composing the message with precise words. "Ready to discuss terms. Original holder wants meeting at scheduled point, come alone or no deal." She sent it through the compromised channel they'd identified, knowing Gabe would pass it along. The response came within minutes. "Midnight! Don't run!" Her hands trembled as she set up the equipment, but her mind remained sharp. The small recorder connected to Valerio's private server, its feed split to stream to 3 additional endpoints, city officials whose names appeared in the ledger with careful annotations. "Clean but pressured," her mother had noted, marking them as potential allies once given leverage. Hours crawled by. Calla checked the equipment repeatedly, ensuring every connection was secure. She arranged the ledger pages in order, creating a clear trail of evidence. Her mother's voice seemed to whisper in her memory. "Systems have patterns, baby. Find the pattern. Find the power." The sun sank into the harbor, painting the water copper and gold. Calla changed into dark clothes, practical shoes. She touched her mother's locket for luck, then positioned herself at the table where the camera could catch every detail. Heavy footsteps approached just after 10. 3 sets, maybe 4. The door crashed open, and men in dark suits filled the doorway. They moved with the careful precision of professionals, spreading out to cover the room's angles. "Evening, gentlemen." Calla's voice remained steady as she gestured to the chairs across from her. "Please, sit. We're live." She tapped the recorder, its red light blinking steadily. For the record, it's 10:17 p.m. Present are myself, Calla Hart, and... She paused, eyebrows raised expectantly. The men exchanged glances. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with a scarred jaw, barked a laugh. "Cute setup, sweetheart. Turn it off." "I don't think so." Calla opened the ledger. "Let's start with June 15th, when your organization moved $500,000 through shell companies linked to Judge Morris's re-election campaign. The transfers are detailed here, along with subsequent judicial decisions that mysteriously favored certain business interests." She continued reading, her voice clear and controlled. Names, dates, dollar amounts, each one a bullet aimed at the Empire's foundation. The men's faces darkened as they realized she wasn't just bait. She was the trap. "That's enough!" Scarred Jaw stepped forward, reaching for the ledger. "Touch it, and 3 city officials get an unedited recording of this meeting, plus copies of every document I just read." Calla met his gaze. "I'm not the scared waitress you expected, am I?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You have no idea what you're playing with, little girl." "Actually, I do. My mother taught me well before you people killed her." Calla turned another page. "Now, shall we continue? There's a fascinating series of transactions from last August." The distant rumble of engines cut through the night air. Not the full motorcade that had first brought Valerio to her diner, but more than a standard crew. The sound grew closer, echoing off warehouse walls. Scarred Jaw's hand twitched toward his jacket. "Kill the feed. Too late. Call's smile was sharp as broken glass. He's been watching since I started. Did you really think he wouldn't notice a live stream on his private server? The engines grew louder, multiple vehicles converging on their location. Call's pulse raced, but she kept her voice steady as she continued reading from the ledger. Each word was another nail in their coffin, every detail another weapon in Valerio's arsenal. The men shifted uneasily, caught between their orders and the approaching threat. Calla squared her shoulders, chin lifted. She wasn't done yet. September 3rd, she read clearly. Transfer authorized by Carlo DeAngelis to accounts controlled by Mancino affiliates. Purpose: staged retaliation at Warehouse 7, targeting specific personnel. She looked directly into the camera. The night your brother died, Valerio, it's all here in black and white. Tires crunched on gravel outside. Car doors slammed in rapid succession. The men drew their weapons, but their eyes darted between Calla, the door, and each other, uncertainty clear in their stance. Calla kept reading, her voice carrying over the approaching footsteps. She had forced their hand, brought everything into the open where it couldn't be buried again. The evidence was streaming to multiple secure locations, the truth finally breaking free of its decade-old chains. Heavy boots thundered up the wooden stairs. The door's hinges groaned as multiple shadows fell across the threshold. Calla's heart pounded, but her voice never wavered as she continued to read, each word another stone in the foundation of justice she'd built. Sodium lights cast sickly yellow pools across the pier's weathered planks. The air tasted of salt and rust, thick with the promise of violence. Calla's footsteps echoed hollow against the wood as her captors marched her outside. A figure stumbled forward from the shadows. Gabe, his expensive suit wrinkled and dark with blood around his thigh. His face was ashen, pupils blown wide with pain or fear or both. Two men half-carried him, his injured leg dragging. "Show them!" a cultured voice commanded from the darkness. "Show them what happens to those who forget their place." Gabe's handlers forced him to his knees. He whimpered, hands raised. "I did everything you asked. Please." "Indeed you did." Massimo Rialto emerged from his black sedan like a specter, silver-haired and elegant in his tailored overcoat. His shoes clicked precisely against the wooden planks as he approached. "And now you'll do one final service." Calla recognized him from old photos in the ledger. The DeAngelis family consigliere who'd served Valerio's father for decades. The man who'd helped design the warehouse trap that killed Valerio's brother. "Quite the performance at the safe house, Ms. Hart." Massimo's smile never reached his eyes. "Streaming evidence to officials. A desperate gambit, but then desperate people make such entertaining mistakes." He gestured to one of his men, who produced a small camera. "We'll be making our own recording tonight. A tragic scene. The unstable DeAngelis heir, destroying everything his father built, ending with the murder of an innocent waitress." Gabe tried to crawl away, but was hauled back. "You said you'd let me leave town. And so you shall. Your body will be found tomorrow, another victim of Valerio's madness." Massimo's voice remained conversational. "The edited footage will show him executing you both. The council will have no choice but to act." In the distance, sirens began to wail. Massimo didn't even blink. "You've been playing both sides," Calla said, pieces clicking into place, "using Mancino as cover while you undermine Valerio from within, all to put things back the way they were. The way they should be." Massimo straightened his cuffs. Valerio's brother understood tradition, respect. But Valerio, he thinks he can run this family like a modern business. Clean money, legitimate ventures. His lip curled. Weakness. Engines roared in the darkness, growing closer, multiple vehicles moving fast. "Your time's up," Calla said, heart pounding. "The evidence is already out there." Evidence can be buried. Witnesses silenced, order restored. Massimo nodded to his men. Position them both. Make it look convincing. Sudden movement erupted at the pier's edge. Dark figures slid into place behind crates and containers. Rocco's voice crackled over a radio, giving coordinates. The sodium lights went out with a sharp crack, plunging the pier into darkness, broken only by the distant city glow. Red laser dots appeared like deadly fireflies, dancing across chests and foreheads. Massimo's men tensed, weapons rising. Their leader remained unnaturally calm. "Valerio," he called out, "come to save your waitress. Your father would be so disappointed." "My father's dead," Valerio's voice cut through the darkness. "Along with the world you're trying to preserve. The old ways kept us strong, but you'd throw it all away for what? Love? Massimo spat the word like poison. "You're not fit to lead this family." "You're right." Valerio's voice moved closer. "I'm not fit to lead my father's family. That's why I'm building something new." More engines approached, Valerio's full tactical team arriving like gathering thunder. Massimo's men shifted uneasily, reading the changing odds. "Something new," Massimo laughed. "There's nothing new in our world, boy, only power and those too weak to hold it." He grabbed Cala's arm. "Let me show you what happens to weakness." Cala drove her elbow backward, connecting with solid flesh. She twisted free and slammed a nearby crate into Massimo's knees. The wood splintered. He staggered. She managed 3 running steps before a hand caught her hair. Cold metal pressed against her temple, stopping her cold. Headlights blazed at the pier's entrance, catching them all in harsh white glare. In that frozen moment, Cala saw everything with crystalline clarity. Gabe bleeding on the wooden planks, Massimo's men forming a defensive circle, laser sights creating a deadly constellation in the night air, and somewhere in the shadows, Valerio watching it all unfold. The gun barrel dug deeper into her skin. Cala didn't close. Her eyes. She'd started this game of truth and consequences. She would see it through to the end. The headlights carved white paths through the mist, revealing Valerio's convoy as it split with military precision. SUVs peeled left and right, boxing the pier, while tactical teams melted into the shadows between shipping containers. The first wave had already taken position behind concrete pilings, weapons trained on Massimo's men. Cala's heart hammered against her ribs as the gun pressed harder against her temple. The man holding her breathed heavily, nervous sweat betraying his fear as Valerio's forces tightened the noose. Through the chaos, Valerio moved like liquid darkness. His steps were measured, deliberate, each movement calculated despite the raw fury in his eyes.